Milton's Adventure, a Milton story. Narrated by Ted Pawncroft. Chapter 12, 24 Hours to Kill. Part 2, The Kouncil of Kraag. Milton stepped out of his freshly generated portal and was instantly met with a conundrum. Before him was a stone plinth with a scroll placed delicately atop it, lit dramatically by two smouldering tiki torches to either side. Behind this ornate carved pedestal was a series of stone steps leading up to a great square platform. Upon this podium was a statue of the largest, most powerful-looking warrior he'd ever seen. Though the Gustman had very clearly conveyed him directly to the unstoppable metal champion, the demon didn't seem to be very alive, looking more like a lifeless suit of armour from some great medieval castle of yore. Its mail was formed of some kind of burnished metal that was completely and utterly black, reflecting not even the flickering torchlight. Every part of the giant champion's armour was exaggerated, its jutting breastplate and wide angular pauldrons juxtaposing its short yet robust greaves and sabatons. Its helmet had 3 curved horns, and its thin visor slit revealed no face beneath. Only darkness. One of the Black Knight's gauntlets was held forth, resting on the hilt of a large falchion blade, which was both taller and thicker than Milton. If this big black guy could pick that up, then he was surely a force to be reckoned with. Beyond the stone podium was nothing but a 20-foot-high wall that penned Milton and the statue into a small square. The ground below was of a dark, chalky gravel, and the sky above was a dour, murky green. Milton stepped forward to inspect the scroll on the plinth. There was almost certainly some kind of foul play afoot here. He moved past it and ascended the steps to the podium, where the metal warrior stood hulking over him at an impressive 15 feet. After waving his hands around in front of it a few times, he concluded that it was either asleep or dormant. He descended the steps and walked to the perimeter of the wall. He was shut in completely with no way to get out besides the portal he'd come through. Thank God he'd found the Gustman when he had. This place would have been impossible to access via his old door travel method. How many other demons were locked away in unreachable cursed zones like this? He touched the black wall, which was as cold as frost, and made an intense wave of sadness wash over him. The substance, he noted, seemed to be the same light-devouring black material as the champion itself. Milton remembered his self-imposed time challenge and walked back to the podium. He decided to hedge his bets, pulling out his bayonet and preparing a well-aimed jab into the sable warrior's groin area. This blade had killed 1,000 demons before. Who's to say this big lad would be any different? He thrust his blade forward. Clang! The blade rebounded from the armour and flew from his hands as though it had been tossed by a bodybuilder, landing with a clank on the ground.
"What the heck?"
cried Milton, stepping back in alarm, expecting the champion to come to life and pulverize him. But it didn't move an inch. Milton waited, then kicked at the warrior's shin plate, which achieved nothing and just hurt a lot.
"What makes you so unstoppable then, you big bulletproof bastard? How can you be unstoppable if you haven't even started?"
Over the next 5 minutes, Milton tried awakening the champion by throwing his shoe at it, burning it with one of the torches, and then, when nothing else worked, commanding the bird to wake it with a rapid salvo of white lightning. After all his attempts had proven fruitless, Milton turned his attention back to the scroll. He walked up to the little plinth and sighed. This was very obviously a trap, but he'd have to spring it eventually one way or another. He didn't quite fancy returning back to this morose locale to do it another time. There seemed to be no other option available. He grabbed the scroll from its position. Instantly, a bassy grating sound came from the plinth, and a green aura dispelled forth from it, expanding outward like some kind of sonic boom. Behind him, his gummy portal wavered and crumbled away, returning to metal node form, and rolling towards him. Milton rolled his eyes. A trap indeed. He unfurled the scroll, which was of fresh white parchment. Accepting the Gustman into his mouth, he cleared his throat, reading aloud from the document.
"Foolish chalice bearer, you have sprung a trap. Removal of this trick scroll has triggered a pressurized plate and activated a Kraagian gummy jamming field. All gummy zone warping apparatus and appliances have been disabled in a 3,000-yard radius. If you are to have any hope of survival, you must navigate this maze with walls of obnium, an impenetrable labyrinth composed of a material stronger than both Panolian sky steel and Quetzalon emeralds combined. In addition, the maze is to be completed whilst pursued by the unstoppable metal champion you see before you. If at any point you should falter, he will be there to demolish you. Do not try to cheat this one, Chalice Bearer. By the time you've finished reading this, he will have awoken. Best wishes, the Kouncil of Kraag.
Milton sighed loudly and screwed up the scroll into a ball, tossing it aside. He looked up at the great metal knight, which rumbled and shuddered as it became animated. Its head shifted down to look at Milton, and through its thin ocularium, 2 fiery green eyes came alight. The unstoppable metal champion stepped down from its pedestal, brandishing its giant blade. Every step it took seemed to shake the ground beneath, accompanied by the loud clang of its armour. Milton backed away, turning to see that a gap had now appeared in the obnium wall behind. Milton turned and bolted through the gap, which immediately branched off in 2 opposite directions. The champion approached behind at a measured pace, its great big treading steps retaining an even speed. Milton made a split-second decision to go left, sprinting down the narrow black corridor. He was certain that the champion would not fit through. Turning back to check, Milton witnessed the armoured brute nonchalantly plough through the black wall, still angled directly at him. So the thick fiend was happy to smash through any obstacle to get to him, even the so-called hardest substance in the universe. Thank God it was as slow as a snail. Milton sprinted forward, taking another left, then a right for good measure. As he rounded a sharp corner, he found that he had come to a dead end.
"Shit!"
he cried, turning around frantically. Going back the way he'd came would place him dangerously close to the champion, which he could hear clanking towards him. If only he could use the Gustman and just make a door. Why, oh why, did his epic gadget have to be proven redundant just as soon as he'd got it? Milton snapped his fingers, remembering another very cool gadget that had recently come into his possession.
Dr. Chamberlain's spring boots! Of course! I'll just put those on and then simply just jump over the maze! Modern problems require modern solutions, after all.
As quick as you like, Milton whipped off his bag and pulled out the spring shoes, swapping them out for his airwalks in a flash. He bent his knees and leapt up over the wall just as the champion came smashing through.
Yahoo!
Cried Milton as he soared into the sky. Unlike the smog-heavy air of Fumery upon Smodge, Milton was surprised to experience no breeze or air resistance of any kind as he shot up into the dull green atmosphere. As he rocketed upwards, he was afforded a bird's-eye view of the oppressive obnium maze, a network of dark angular paths that spread out in every possible direction. The sooner he was out of this horrible place, the better. Before he knew it, he'd hit the floor and was ready to jump again. No wonder the demon Helwyn had become so attached to these. It was like experiencing the combined bounce factor of the world's coolest bouncy castle, a giant trampoline, and a pogo stick on the moon, all at once. Milton continued to bounce through the maze, landing between the high-rising walls and frequently glancing back at the metal champion, which proceeded to smash its way through far behind. In due course, the end of the maze came into view. How he would have managed to navigate this labyrinthian monstrosity without cheating was beyond him. Evidently, he was not meant to have escaped. Also ahead was the edge of the green portal-jamming barrier. He had escaped. The maze with walls of obnium had been thwarted. To celebrate, Milton performed one huge final jump and attempted to do a big sniff of space salts while in mid-air. But before he could bring the handful of white powder to his nose, he lost balance and began to flail around. In seconds, he was upside down and falling down fast towards the perimeter of the wall of the maze below. In a huge crash of commotion, Milton hit the top of the final wall, bounced off it, and landed on the other side on his back. The boots skidded off his feet, one of them crumpled and broken, and the other one with its metal stilt bent beyond repair. He had made it through the maze, but he'd lost the fantastic bouncing boots in the process. A fair trade indeed, he agreed to himself. He scrambled to his feet and assessed the damage. A few nasty bruises, but no broken limbs, courtesy of his super-strong bloodstone-imbued body. This side of the landscape was even more miserable than the confines of the maze, with nothing but ragged dead shrubs and dark gravel for miles. Milton listened out for the warrior, hearing no clanging footsteps. The big guy was still far behind him in the maze.
Drat! I'm down to 23 hours!
He cried, inspecting the 24-hour glass that remained clipped to his bag. He paused for a moment of thought. The unstoppable metal champion was the toughest and roughest demon he'd encountered so far. Finding its weakness, if it even had one, would take time, and time that he didn't have right now.
Fuck that big metal bastard! I'm getting out of here! Activate!
The gustman shot from Milton's butthole and formed a gate up front, just as the distant stomping footfall of the as-yet unbeatable champion became audible. Milton pulled out his list. The 24-hour challenge wasn't looking good so far, but perhaps the 6th demon on the list, Chairman Greene, would give him the speedy kill he desired. Hoping he wouldn't have to return to this dreary place for a good long while, Milton kicked the busted boots aside and ran through the rippling gate up front. When Milton emerged from the gate, he was surprised to find that he was once again in the formidable black expanse of outer space. He took a few panicked breaths before remembering that the chalice had previously bestowed him with the convenient ability to survive in space without oxygen or being frozen and exploded. The nanogate had generated itself upon a satellite space station in orbit of the biggest, greyest planet he'd ever seen. Far bigger than Jupiter, far greyer than the moon, and taking up the majority of his left-side peripheral vision. The surface of this superplanet was pocked with both giant craters and twinkling civilizations, presumably great cities or industrial installations of some kind. The station he stood upon was dwarfed by the big grey world, but by no means small. Its main bulk consisted of a large glass dome with its lower portion exposed to the cosmos, presumably acting as an entrance. Coming out from this central construction was a large circular plateau, and from that 4 turning arms, upon one of which stood Milton with his hands on his hips. The long mechanized extremity ended in a great green beacon just behind Milton that flashed rapidly, likely to make the station visible from the planet's surface and prevent collisions. Leaving the nanoportal in place, in case he had to make a speedy getaway, Milton began to traverse the arm towards the central dome, unaffected by the lack of gravity that would have the average human floating off and bursting in an instant. It quickly became apparent that this arm was not meant for walking upon, except maybe by some kind of alien or robotic construction crew to repair the beacon, evident by the ladders running sideways along it. As Milton came to the end of the arm and to the plateau, he could make out a group of figures sitting around a circular table in the centre of the dome, likewise unaffected by the open void of space. He crouched down to avoid detection, but the figures seemed deeply engaged in some kind of tabletop game with a board and pieces. These seated folk were by no means average-looking. In fact, they were a rather colourful cohort indeed.
Demons! A whole rotten lot of them!
Sensed Milton excitedly, counting 6 seated around the table in tall chairs, 4 of which were currently empty. The situation was most fortuitous. This was the chance to get his demon-killing score up from a measly 2 to a whopping 8 in one fell swoop. It wouldn't even take that long. None of the demons looked particularly strong or smart. Moving slowly around the curvature of the dome, Milton took a good long look at each demon, who very helpfully had their names embossed on the back of their seats as though they were famous movie directors. The nearest to Milton was an enormously fat man in a dark green pinstripe suit, if you could even call him a man, for he was hairless and possessed a strange, near-translucent skin tone, reminiscent of a deep-sea fish. One of his webbed 4-fingered hands held a fat stogie, and the other stroked a fluffy marsupial pet. The fat fella, whose chair read Count Hoager the 14th, was adorned in expensive-looking golden jewellery, and could be heard laughing heartily as he placed his pieces onto the board.
I play my word, Torero Lentis, for 410 points,
he bellowed in a throaty, theatrical voice. Milton moved around to see the names on the next 2 chairs around the table, which were both empty. He grinned ear to ear, for these seats had once belonged to El Frijoles Grandes and De Bugoro, 2 of his former adversaries. It seemed that Milton had already left his mark on this pathetic little demon committee without realizing it. The next-seated demon, whose large, clumsy hands seemed to be making a total mess of the pieces arranged before him, was instantly recognizable as an overgrown, oafish oblin, wearing tight military fatigues, large green epaulettes, and a peaked cap with an unidentifiable golden emblem. This came as a shock to Milton, who had never dreamt that the disgusting denizens of the Pucker realm would have made it to space, let alone put on clothes. But it did make sense that a select few of Kraag's most loyal foot soldiers would have been stationed at other planets, especially ones as grey as this. The great goon's chair read General Obulg, and he was quite obviously some kind of great off-world Oblin authority, despite what his brutish caveman brow and yellowed tusk-like teeth might suggest. Milton continued tiptoeing around to see that the next chair, once again empty, had previously seated none other than his very first kill, Peanut Pete. But this didn't mean that the gathering was without peanutty presence, as the next seat around belonged to another of the lanky living legumes, this time a lady with a beehive hairstyle, big yellow lips, and a peanut-patterned frock to boot. Milton rolled his eyes upon seeing the name Peanut Pat inscribed on the back of the chair. How unoriginal. The seat next to hers was empty, but Milton had not slain its owner, Dr. Retcon, a name which he recognized from the list only. The final 3 seats were filled by Katharsys the Incinerator, an intimidating-looking cloaked being whose face was concealed by a hood and whose bony white hands were partially aflame, clutching a martini glass half filled with a gelatinous green liquid. Mrs. Peaseyes, an old woman with no facial features save for 2 beady pea-like green eyeballs, and Popaloo, master of interruptions, who looked like a clip-art court jester mixed with the Lucky Charms mascot.
What a load of freaks,
chuckled Milton under his breath.
But where's Chairman Greene?
I played Ningus for 9.5 points,
grunted the Oblin general despondently. Evidently he was of the same articulate Oblin variety as the Pucker Realm tribe chieftain Milton had vanquished. The grey lummox haphazardly dropped his pieces onto the board, much to the amusement of the bloated Count Hoager.
Stellar play as always, Obulg,
chortled the flabby Count.
Remind me, when are you to enter the grand playoffs?
Peanut Pat moved to place her pieces on the board, but a small node in the centre of the table suddenly flashed green and projected a 2D rotating PNG of a green iconographic man, akin to such a symbol seen on a traffic light or a toilet door. Milton listened as the hovering projection addressed the gallery of rogues.
Councilman, it has come to my attention that the chalice bearer has awoken the unstoppable metal champion.
The statement was met with heavy applause and cheer from the council, which Milton determined to be the very same Kouncil of Kraag that Debu Goro had spoken of, and who had set up the ill-thought-out maze trap he'd just escaped. The obese Count Hoager stood up from his seat with the sound of a hot water bottle being shaken, and clapped his wet hands.
Ah, tremendous news, Chairman. That little wretch has had it coming for a long, long time.
More whoops and huzzas came from the other councilmen. The floating hologram, which could only represent Chairman Greene, interrupted them.
Councilman, please halt your premature celebrations. I regret to inform you that the chalice bearer has escaped the maze with walls of ognium, evaded the unstoppable metal champion, and currently remains at large. After careful analysis of his sporadic movement patterns, I have calculated a 65% chance that his next target could be this very embassy, or the surface world of Huak.
Groans and wails came from the councilman, and Count Hoager sat down in a funk. General Obulg banged his fist down on the table, sending several green runed tiles from the board game flying across the room. One of them skittered off towards Milton and ricocheted off thin air in front of him. He rubbed his chin. So the Kouncil of Kraag was surrounded by some kind of invisible force field. He smiled and shook his head. They would have to try harder than that to keep him out.
How can we keep letting this happen? The chalice bearer has slain nearly 1/3 of we agents of primary annihilation, many of whom were close personal relations. My own great-great-grandfather Fuckmouth was one of them, and he had since retired. The bearer's appetite for killing is insatiable. I say we teach him a lesson and send him a few of my armies his way.
The 2D holographic chairman spun to face the general.
Councilman Obulg, you are fully aware that such a move would require liaison with the surface world, specifically negotiation with the Church of Kraag, and you know how the Grand Archpriest can be.
Then I'll do it myself.
The foolhardy Oblin stood up and withdrew a misshapen machete from a scabbard to his side.
Let me out of here, and I shall butcher the bearer by my own hand.
Chairman Greene disappeared and reappeared twice as big in front of the Oblin General, barring his exit as he marched towards the force field.
Councilman Obulg, may I remind you that we are under strict orders not to leave the orbiting embassy. The outside world has proven too dangerous for any agent of Kraag. I calculate an 85% chance that leaving the premises will result in rapid termination like that which has befallen the councilmen who have left prior.
Obulg returned to his seat sulkily.
But I wish to see my troops. I miss the surface world.
Then you should not have agreed to take Paul Pork's seat on the council,
Rebuffed Chairman Greene.
The almighty Kraag demands that his council remain impartial to any ongoings outside of the orbiting embassy.
I've just about had it up to here with this bastard chalice bearer.
Barked Count Hoager.
He destroyed my bloody cruise ship. Do you have any idea how much that cost me? I had to liquidate half of my shares in Kraag Coin Crypto. Not to mention that my chances of a succulent tropical vacation were completely ruined. I'm sick to bloody death of bloody Milton Hamley Oliver!
Gasps sounded around the table, and Hoager clamped his soggy hands to his mouth. Don't say his name, whimpered Katharsys, the Incinerator, in a timid, shaky voice that sounded like he was close to tears. Please do not ever say his name! Chairman Greene spoke up.
Councilman Hoager, we agreed to refrain from uttering the chalice bearer's name out of respect for our fallen colleagues. Regrettably, the maze with walls of Ognium did not work. Now we must plan the next protocol.
Peanut Pat raised her spindly gloved hand, and Chairman Greene gave her the go-ahead to speak.
My fellow councilmen, we have all lost friends and loved ones. There ain't a day that goes by that I don't think of my dear brother Peter. But no good will come from all this bickering and squabbling. We must learn from the chalice bearer, study him as to understand his ways. I grow envious of his unwavering persistence and ability to dedicate himself to his duties. If only we could band together and go...
Popaloo! Cried the little jester imp without warning, leaping up onto the table and causing a most unwelcome interruption, dancing a jig and letting out laughs and fart noises in time with the jingling of his bell-ended boots.
Remind me again, why is this irksome little fool on the council?
Bellowed Obulg, swiping at the little jester man, who had kicked the remaining pieces off the board and was now attempting to dry hump Count Hoager's pet.
I'd say he is just about as much right as you big grey ignoramus!
Guffawed Count Hoager, lighting his fat cheroot on Katharsys' flaming forearm and blowing an outrageous sum of cigar smoke into the Oblin's face.
What do you do around here besides shout and declare war on things?
Obulg withdrew his machete again.
Right, that's it. I'm going to destroy you!
He roared. Chairman Greene issued a surge of green electricity to the seats of both Hoager and Obulg.
Councilman, stop at once,
said the hologram.
Peanut Patricia is right. We must stop this infighting and work together to find a solution. I will not stand for this childish quarreling. It is not the way of Kraag. If you cannot cease your feuding, I will expel you both into outer space, where your chances of survival are exactly 0%.
Hoager and Obulg fell silent. Katharsys the Incinerator downed his green drink shakily and stood up.
I say we leave this place. We are not safe here. We are on the chalice bearer's accursed list.
The hooded pyromancer turned to the chairman.
You said it yourself. He will be after us. If we do not leave now, he will come and slay us all with his terrible blade.
Milton smiled, sensing it was nearly time for his curtain call.
Katharsys, no. Your inebriation has heightened your level of irrational perception once again,
responded Greene.
This embassy is surrounded by a state-of-the-art, one-of-a-kind imperceptible Kraagian energy field. Only those imbued with Kraag's blessing may pass through. Even the bearer's gummies' own warping capabilities are no good here. I'm proud to estimate a 99.999999999% chance that he will be completely unable to penetrate it.
Milton decided that he had heard enough slander against his name. He stood up, unsheathed his pucker blade, and strutted up to the edge of the field, yelling out to the council.
So this is the famous Kouncil of Kraag I've heard so much about.
Immediately, all of the demons turned to look at him, with shocked expressions and mouths agape.
Here's here!
Cried Katharsys, scrambling to cower behind his chair.
Kraag's bane has come to slay us all!
The floating chairman's hue flashed from green to red, and an alert siren sounded.
Chalice bearer. How did you get here? The energy field is impenetrable.
The name is Milton.
Spat Milton, enunciating his name as much as he could, and making all of the councilmen flinch.
0.01 chance of penetration, you reckon? Sounds like you really need to work on your fractions a little bit more. Not to mention your god-awful security. How about extending this force field to a mile out?
How are you surviving in the vacuum of space? How are you talking? This does not compute.
Stuttered Chairman Greene, as though his robotic AI brain was unable to process the information properly.
Oh, well, I gained that ability about the time that I pulverized El Frijoles in a single punch.
Milton inspected his nails coolly.
You demons really are a bunch of pushovers.
What about the unstoppable metal champion? My systems tell me that he remains undefeated.
Noted the chairman.
The metal champion sucked ass. He was way too slow and boring. I left him in your crappy maze world. I'll go finish him after I'm finished with you.
General Obulg rose to his feet, machete held forth once more.
Chalice bearer, you killed my great-great-grandfather and many of my cousins. I will finish you before you even finish one of us. Chairman, let him pass through, so that I may show him the wrath of Obulg.
Oh, please. You should really listen to Katharsys. The second I get in there, I'll vanquish you all in an instant.
Milton waved his blade at the council.
Don't you realise you're all just a bunch of dregs and rejects? Seems like I've already killed all the competent demons on this sad little council. Who's left? A big grey loser? The blobfish from Men in Black 3? A peanut with tits? The fool on the hill? Fireman Sam and... I don't even know what that fucking old lady is.
Oh, don't worry about me, dearie. I've just got Peaseyes.
Smiled the old woman, who hadn't moved or said anything at all up to this point, and could very well have been asleep the whole time.
I will not let this insolent brat stand there and insult me!
Cried Hoager.
Do something at once!
What are you gonna do?
Laughed Milton.
Play a few more rounds of Alien Scrabble?
Alien Scrabble?
Repeated Count Hoager, visibly insulted.
Alien Scrabble? What a pitifully naive interpretation of the most elaborate and complex word game this side of Quackstraw 9! No, you little wretch. This is Cribnib, an infinitely more intricate affair than your so-called Scrabble.
Fucking Cribnib!
Laughed Milton.
Are you fucking serious?
I have heard enough.
Roared Obulg, vaulting the table and charging at Milton.
I will end this myself. For fuck mouth!
Obulg, no.
Cried Chairman Greene.
I calculate the odds of your defeat at 10 to 1.
The big grey brute passed through the Kraagian force field and out into open space. Like his fellow councilman El Frijoles, who Milton only now realized had been of the same grey hue, Obulg did not perish from exposure to deep space, and, like himself, withstood the lack of gravity.
You're not the only one who can survive in the hard vacuum. We Oblins can withstand the pressure of 10,000 atmospheres.
Oh, how very convenient,
said Milton.
Shame you'll not be able to withstand the pressure of one Milton!
Obulg cried out and swung forth with his machete, which was met with Milton's bayonet and thrust aside. The general attempted a punch, but Milton grabbed the big grey fist with his left hand and twisted his bulky arm around. The Oblin wailed. Milton went in with his knee and struck Obulg in the groin. When the general creased over in pain, Milton plunged his free dagger hand into the oversized orc's chest. Spherical droplets of dark grey Oblin blood poured from the wound in Obulg's open mouth and floated around in zero gravity.
Councilman Obulg is deceased. I repeat, the chalice bearer has murdered Councilman Obulg,
cried Chairman Greene. Milton kicked the oaf to the side as the bird did its job and expelled him away with a flash of white justice. The rest of the demons watched in horror as Milton removed the gleaming chalice from his backpack, their eyes flashing green as they beheld the glass artifact.
The chalice!
croaked Hoager.
Return it at once. It belongs to Kraag, not you.
No chance,
laughed Milton as the chalice filled itself up with the essence of Obulg.
He uses it to drink the lifeblood of his enemies,
howled Katharsys.
That's right. Now check this out.
Milton downed the mixture in record time and let out a huge burp.
I cannot watch any more. Chairman!
cried Hoager, waving his mucilaginous hand.
Dispose of him at once.
The chairman, whose voice now seemed to be coming from all around the dome, spoke.
Affirmative. Activating turret defense protocol. Chance of survival, 0%.
Milton leapt back as 4 gun turrets sprouted suddenly from the floor just in front of the force field. Instantly, they began to fire green lasers in his direction. Milton jumped and flipped out of the way while the Kouncil of Kraag watched with bated breath. After reflecting one of the green beams with the chalice, creating a blinding prismatic refraction, Milton retaliated and struck at one with his blade, causing all 4 to retreat back into their sockets.
Is that it?
Roared Milton.
Is that all you've got?
Those lasers are to ward off cosmic hornets.
Came the voice of Chairman Greene.
Further defense beyond the Kraagian force field is unnecessary, as there is a 150% chance you will not be able to penetrate it.
Oh yeah? Well, I like those odds,
smirked Milton cockily, striding towards the field to be instantly blown back with a force that felt like he had been struck by a speeding monster truck, sending him flying back to the very edge of the plateau. The demons erupted into laughter, but Milton sprang to his feet again.
No sweat off my back,
bellowed Milton.
There's nothing in this universe that Milton can't penetrate.
Milton strode forth again, this time plunging his Pekingese blade into the force field, which was met with heavy resistance and an ear-piercing static noise. Milton grunted and groaned, but at last he gave in.
Ha! What a riveting display!
Laughed Count Hoager.
It seems that the famous chalice bearer is no threat after all.
Why, he's just a little boy,
cackled Peanut Pat mirthfully. The rest of the demons seemed to have become considerably calmer. Even Katharsys the Incinerator was no longer whimpering or wailing, and had poured himself another green drink, this time setting the alcoholic beverage alight with a touch from his flaming forefinger.
No! Just wait! I can get in, you'll see. Then I'm going to do to you what I did to that big oblin,
cried Milton, stamping his foot.
The fate of Obulg matters not,
spoke Greene, appearing once more as a floating hologram in the center of the table.
There are countless other agents who can take his place on the council.
Bullshit,
cried Milton.
You've already got loads of empty seats.
That is besides the point,
replied Chairman Greene.
The great Kouncil of Kraag is far stronger than you can perceive, chalice bearer.
You guys fucking suck!
Shouted Milton,
cowering away behind your little protective bubble.
He turned away, returning the chalice to his bag and preparing a line of space salts on the back of his hand. Count Hoager guffawed.
Oh, look! The chalice bearer has become addicted to street drugs. How tragic.
Milton spun around.
They're prescription drugs. I'll have you know that I need them for my space transit.
Milton was interrupted suddenly by the little imp, who performed a cartwheel across the table and pulled down his trousers, letting little fireworks shoot out from his groin that exploded with a bang.
Now that's why we have him on the council,
chuckled Count Hoager, taking a big suck from his cigar. The rest of the demons laughed and clapped as Milton looked on with reproach. He checked the 24 hourglass clipped to his bag. 22 hours remained. He'd wasted a whole hour on this piteous space station with only one meagre kill to show for it. He quickly came to the conclusion that he would have to return here to finish the job after he'd found a way through that darned magical barrier. He called out over the guffawing demons.
Your days are numbered, Kraagian scum. I'll be back for you.
He turned and strutted off back up the arm towards his gummy portal, hearing Chairman Greene's robotic voice from behind.
I calculate a 100% chance that the Kouncil of Kraag are the greatest, and a 1000% chance that you are a bitch-ass coward, chalice bearer.
Milton held up his middle finger to the demons as he walked away. This portion of his demon-slaying kill streak had been a partial failure, but he wouldn't let this get him down. He pulled out the list as he approached his portal at the end of the jutting metal protuberance.
What's next? Let's see here. Didn't kill the metal champion, didn't kill Chairman Greene. How about number 7? Willoughby the crocodile. Sounds like it'll be a breeze.
This episode of Milton's Adventure, A Milton Story, was sponsored by Rennie's, the fast-acting and effective peppermint chewable tablet that is sure to rid you of your heartburn and indigestion. I've been using Rennie's a lot recently, specifically after a steak dinner that I engaged in last week with a few work colleagues. Needless to say, I was eating Rennie peppermints by the handful. Rennie's peppermint. You'll never know when you're going to need one.
Suck these robot nuts.